You guys don't need my intro anymore. So we've developed Jurassic Island, Space Armada, Fantasy, REM, a Fantasy VR experience, and a Prism Break out there in the booth. With our, we have 4 devs, 1 designer on the team. I think I got that math right. So yeah.
And I'm Jonathan. I created Quiver. I've been working in VR for now for a little over a year. So.
Hey, this is Jikan. I'm from Subdream Studios. Our studio is making the games targeted for VR arcade. And also before Subdream, we are at Colourful NI, which is one of the biggest VR-focused gaming company in the world. And then we released 3 titles last year with the Colourful NI. And the biggest title was the Cyberpunk, which is one of the first multiplayer game in VR.
Quick question, can everybody hear Jonathan and Jikan in the back? No?
No.
Justin, can you check?
Hello.
Oh, maybe just closer? Yeah. Maybe just closer. Okay.
I'm Bryce Davis from Castle Steps.
I'm Evan.
I'm Garrick.
We made the horror game The Bellows.
We've been doing VR development for about a year now.
Oh, awesome. So again, kind of guideline topics that I've prepared is for an indie developer looking in what's the revenue model? What's the revenue model for an indie developer or team to sustain a VR studio business if you're looking into getting into it or if you're just starting out? And also, what's the most successful gameplay mechanics you found with your customers? And what is the value that you see VR brings into the gameplay and what you try to incorporate and use VR for? And nausea, which I really want to get to at the end. And then just kind of your thoughts on a VR arcade market versus in-home market, how you perceive those and how you kind of apply your business to each of those. Yeah, who wants to take the revenue model first? Like a sustainable VR studio business.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I think it's very important to know what the market looks like. If the VR market itself already isn't that big. This is not PC gaming. This is not mobile game market. And if you're developing a game for a niche market already within VR, you really need to understand that you may be targeting 1,000 people, and that's the entire market that you have available to you. So you need to not scope a project that is too big to be sustainable in the market. And as long as you kind of understand what your market is, you say, let me assume that I'm going to get 15, 20%. I think you can assume that you're going to get a much larger percentage of the market at this point because there's not that much content yet available, and you have a much better inroad into all of these early adopters who really want VR to succeed. They're really interested in checking out new games. The marketplace is not saturated yet. As long as you kind of realize what the market actually looks like for you, look at some Steam Spy data, look at data, and see how many people are actually available to buy your game. If you're targeting arcades, you need to be seeing what arcades do you have access to, how can you scope your project reasonably in the beginning so that you're not trying to spend $100,000 developing a game, because that's really a hard target to reach right now. You need to spend like $15,000 or $20,000 developing a game maybe, and even that is not guaranteed. So it's just being really careful about looking at the market and what is your target. And yeah.
And a quick follow-up, Jonathan, you're a one-man dev team. Got some angel investment funding early on, and you contract out the design work. Would you recommend that as a working model for some certain people, indie developers who are maybe
absolutely.
one person?
Would
that work?
If you feel relatively comfortable, if you're using Unity, lean on the asset store. It's unbelievably helpful. There's so much you can do there. If you want to get a proof of concept out, do not spend a ton of money getting a concept working. That's not there are plenty of resources to make things where you can make an amazing game for under $100 worth of assets. You don't have to create a huge studio. You don't have to spend your time making the prototype, spend your time polishing that up, make sure it's well received within the community. They are absolutely willing to give you amazing feedback at this point. Don't psych yourself up to do a huge project when the market really can't afford to pay you for it.
Do you have any comments from the other studios on revenue
So
model?
for my side, so first of all, for the revenue model, I think there's two aspects. One is as a company and one as a product. And then one as a company side, our company funded $1.5 million seed funding right now. So I think we are very well funded as a company. So my thought about the running the company is that I'm actually not comfortable to make a game that can generate great revenue at this moment, and I'm actually not really interested in that at all. So I'm thinking more as of today, building the great team, they get great experience to make the great game, so that when the market is getting more mature, we can make a great game for the market, and that's the time that we want to hit the market. So that's my basic thinking about how we run the company. And then if you think about the product, I think if you look at the PC or mobile gaming, it was all free to play. So free to play is getting more better way to monetize for the company and the customer too. So we do think that free to play will come later, but not right now. So we are selling the games between $10 to $20 range, and like he said, we are making small scope of games because number one, I think the market is not ready. Number two, I think our team has to keep iterate what's the best experience. So yeah, that's the way we are running the studio right now.
Yeah. Any comments from Castle Steps?
Yeah. So, like kind of what Jonathan was saying, we are a niche within the niche of virtual reality, and very much so had a customer basis of around a couple thousand within the Steam store. And so recognizing that, we switched more to focusing on the arcade market and made something that could be impactful for the mass public or anyone who walks into an arcade. So we more focused on something that could impress and scare someone from anywhere that has access to an arcade.
Any questions from the audience regarding building if you're a developer or a sustainable model? Okay. So what have you guys found are the most successful gameplay mechanics in your games that your customers love and rave about?
So just a really quick thing, people like just interacting. Like, and our game's a bad example of this because it is an incredibly interactive game, but we had so many people playing our game, and they would stop and play for 15 minutes just playing with like floating pots and floating books and just hitting things like that. It's insane. And it's still, when we go in, we had a part in an old version of the game where it was just you walk down a hallway and stuff flies at you. And someone made an entire game on that concept alone. I think it was called like Buffalo Tornado or something, and it sold really well. Turbuffalo, yeah, I don't know. And so very simple, the simple concept of interacting with the world around you. I mean, Job Simulator killed it. What they did was literally that. It's just picking stuff up. It's tossing stuff in the air. You know, it's incredible how if you just put someone who's never done VR in before, that is research right there, and that should be something you should focus on. And I know when we're looking at what our next projects are going to be, gameplay mechanics that work are simple. Like, I'm talking about picking up an apple and dropping it on the floor and it smushes. That is entertaining even to us, and we've spent 100 hours in VR every week. Yeah, just from a new project perspective, I guess.
So for me, I think of four things. Number one is the no VR sick is the first policy.
Yep.
So any fun experience you're gonna have, if there is a VR sick, then they are not gonna come back. So that's the worst thing you're gonna do. So that's the first strategy. And then the second thing is the like Jay just mentioned, social. Anything you interact with other people in VR is really fun. So that's something that we are pursuing. And then third thing is the intuitive. So whenever you get into VR, if you have to explain them, you do this, you do that, and then this is how you play it, I think that's already, I mean, not really intuitive at all. So very intuitive to play the game right away, how you play the game. You know that right away. That's the, I think, most important. And the last thing is the why VR. Let's say, we talk about zombie shooting just now, but I think zombie is something that really easily understandable why VR, right? That's not going to be happening in the real world. So that's very easily understandable. And also, like our Cyberpunk was the kind of ping pong game, but there is no gravity. So that is something that you cannot do in the real world, and you can only do it in VR. So those four philosophies, that's something that we are pushing for the company.
Gotcha. I have two. The first is multiplayer. I think interacting with somebody next to you, it's immediately clear that it's different than just having like an AI counterpart or even a teammate in a non-VR game that doesn't have complete control of their body. Watching someone wave at you is an unbelievably compelling experience, and it doesn't matter if that's all it is. It really does mean something to when you see it for the first time. The other thing is physical interactions with things. Even in games that you shoot a gun, I think the more interesting part is dropping the magazine and changing it. There are some physical interaction things that you do that are incredibly compelling. Archery, bow and arrow, taking an arrow out and putting it on the bowstring and moving it around. In any game I can think of, just grabbing objects off the table and throwing them around. It's really, you want to be able to do physical things with your environment, because one of the coolest things about the fully tracked motion controllers and things like that is that that is so novel. Shooting a gun is not new, and you can do a light gun in arcades that are really old. But taking a magazine out, changing it, feeling the controller's haptic feedback when you do that, that is new, and it's an amazing experience. And I think the novelty hasn't worn off on even the people who are spending hundreds of hours all the time in VR. It's still so cool, because spending 20 years not doing that and then being able to do that now, it's going to be cool and exciting for quite a while still.
And I would echo multiplayer, social, being able to play with your friends makes the game different and new and unique to that experience, and just being able to play with your friends. And another mechanic that we learned actually through Prison Break, our game this time, is the simplicity, I think was also mentioned, and interactive. So simple, interactive. So in Prison Break, you punch blocks. It's pretty simple. You get to interact with something. You give the player a chance to interact, and then you give them a visually rewarding sensation. The block breaks, and it actually did something. So you reward the player. I actually called up our creative director, because he's better suited to answer this question than I am, on what the most successful gameplay mechanics we think have been in VR. Do you want the mic, or do you want to shout?
I can shout pretty loud. Hey guys, I'm Francisco Martin, creative director. You might know me as the voice, Carnival voice in Prison Break, a new game. The question was...
most successful gameplay mechanics. So like, what do we design with in mind?
What we design in mind, there's a lot of things that we design in mind. Top things is simplicity. A lot of people, one of the first problems with new casual players to VR is whenever they come into it and they put on the headset and everything, they stand there and they stay standing there. They don't actually move. And in our arena scale games, we want people to move, to feel like they are actually immersed in that world. So when they move around, so it's like teaching a kid to walk again. How do you do that? Well, let's teach them first to walk. Let's teach them things that they already know how to do in real life. Punching, walking. Teleporting, as great as it is, it's something that you don't do in real life. You don't teleport, you don't press a button to pull around. So first of all, simplicity of control, simplicity of learning, conveyance, so that a player learns as they're playing. Not having to have somebody have to tell you everything, you learning, oh, this is great, I'm going to continue learning. Replayability. Replayability is another big factor in it. We feel that replayability can be done by either scorekeeping, you can either find new ways to customize your characters and find new ways to bring the players back. And you have that innate sense of addiction, of I want to play this again because it was fun. And that is something kind of hard to find. That is not something that you'll know from the beginning. So at Virtual World Arcade, we had a game jam where we took 1 week to try out 3 or 4 different experiments. And that's where Prison Break came from. Prison Break is a very different game from how it started. And it was just a lot of iterations to see what do people really like and what do people really want to continue moving forward.
Thanks, Francisco.
I want to add a little bit to the simplicity thing. I think another important thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people who are playing your games are not only doing VR for the first times, but also maybe playing games for the first time. especially in arcades, this is that's a type of industry where you're going to get people who are not game players roped in and say, hey, come try this out, mom. You need to think about the game mechanics that gamers take for granted and not use, like you need to think about those, give them some real thought to make sure that you're not taking mechanics for granted that took lots of learning for you to take for granted. There's plenty of things, health bars, joystick controls. There are lots of things that are kind of in every single game, but that doesn't mean that they're intuitive. They required learning, and it's only because everybody who's playing these new games has played old games, and you don't get a lot of new people playing into the game industry very often, that it doesn't get really talked about, but it's still an important thing to note, is that there are lots of things that gamers have learned, and everybody who's a game designer has usually played quite a few games, and there's lots of things that we take for granted, and making sure that you can step back and say, okay, does grandpa know about this mechanic because he might be playing the game, and that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's happened a bunch of times when you give it to a non-gamer, a friend, and you're like, oh my goodness, this game is so amazing, this is so much fun, this new Halo game or whatever, and then they're playing and you notice that they're really bad at the game. It's like, wait, what's A button?
Yeah.
Wait, what's the trigger? Wait, is this button? Oh, this is how it goes. All those different things is not as intuitive as we think they are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And this was touched on a little bit briefly before, but what do you think is the value that VR brings to gameplay, and what is that thing that you guys are most excited about, why you are in VR, that you want to push through to the players, to the customers in your VR experience, the unique VR factor?
Yeah, so one of the first inspirations of making a horror experience was being able to make literally a virtual reality, bring someone to a place that is not possible otherwise. So the original concept for our game was taking people to the ghost world or whatever reality, like in Poltergeist or classic horror movies, where there's this realm or dimension that things are familiar but clearly different. And so that was our focus with the original game, is making something where you recognize where you were, but you felt like you were in a foreign place, which is a very unique thing for virtual reality, to be able to bring people to new places with literally creating realities.
So for us, so right now we are making the all our games are multiplayer games. So our short-term goal is to make people to enjoy together in VR in new medium, and in the future we wanted to make our experience to be more like a lobby experience, that they can meet first in the lobby and hang out, and then they can play whatever the gameplay that we are making. So that's the our long-term goal, and then maybe we might even have like a dating games that they can play together or something like that. So
Dating games?
yeah.
That's interesting.
Really? Cool.
So,
That's interesting.
yeah, any social experience we wanna do it in VR. That's the
So, I mean, I think there's some real benefits of player interaction. Is like VR is one of those first mediums where people can interact in an environment together, like play a game, but really be together in it, where you can look next to you and see your friend there with you. I think like that can maybe exist in laser tag, but to a much lesser degree. There aren't a lot of ways that you can stand side by side next to someone, look at them, look around, and then know that they're still right next to you, and still be in a totally new world. And obviously the word like immersion gets thrown around a lot as kind of but it's a really important thing to be thinking about, and I think that it's used a lot because it's so powerful. When you step into a world and you're looking off a cliff and you feel a sense in your stomach that there's a huge drop before you, that's never been able to be done before. Like, that is incredible new technology, and that feeling of immersion and really feeling like you're at the edge of a precipice, or in the middle of a huge field, or whatever you want to be placed, believing that you're there is probably the most important thing, is that you can really convey to someone that they're not standing in their living room, and when they take off the headset, there's an instant of, whoa, where am I? And that's unbelievable. Like, that's the VR experience.
And my personal vision for VR is the immersion allows the player to actually feel like they're in an alternate universe. It allows them to live through another character that's not themselves. And once you can live an experience, then people learn through experience. People gain understanding of things through experience. And that's what I believe long-term the value of VR is going to be. The value is I can go through an experience that I might not have had in real life, or have 1 in 10 chance of actually doing a once-in-a-lifetime experience in real life. But I have this experience, and now it come and because once you have that understanding, then you could do things like empathy building. You can allow people to learn a skill and learn more about themselves, or life skills and things like that. So then when they take off the headset and they leave, they've experienced something, and they've learned from it, and they've become something better, is what I truly believe where the value of VR will be, and that we can create experiences like that. So that's what gets me most excited about VR. I'm sure Francisco has something as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't
The
use this. I'll blow up the stadium if I shout into the mic.
Sure.
For me, and doing a little bit of step backwards from the whole macro, and I do believe the immersion there of like these experiences that you can do in a 2D screen is very important, but I would like to add onto that more of the micro level. The fact that you immerse in your conveyance, the time that it takes you to forget that you have a controller in your hand is much shorter in VR than in other games. Because if you see someone in a keyboard and mouse setting, for them, they don't see a keyboard and mouse. That gamer doesn't see a keyboard and mouse. They just know I'm moving forward. That's all they think about. They're not thinking I'm pressing W, which is creating my character to move forward. No, I'm moving forward. Mm-hmm. In VR, that experience becomes that conveyance, that immersion, going from, even if it's a game where you're just sitting in front of a stage or even in a room, that teaching tool of players of I'm moving forward and not thinking I have this controller, I'm pressing trigger, and that's causing my gun to shoot. That there's something there that needs to be, realized, and that's why I believe it's really strongly in you need to really understand your tools and understand if I didn't know how to play a game, what would be the first thing that I would do? What would be the first thing that I would try out? So I really think that in the macro, like they mentioned, is very important, but additionally in the micro, the immersion of a player is in this world, but from the player into the technology into the world. Yeah. That length of learning gets much, much shorter, which is really important in an arcade setting because let's say you go into an arcade setting and you are going to play Street Fighter against somebody who already knows how to play Street Fighter, a fighting game. There's a problem there. I'm going to have to think I need to quarter circle B to shoot a fireball. But that player, they're not thinking quarter circle B, but they're doing, I'm just shooting a fireball. Yeah. So having that gap being bridged much shorter makes the gameplay between professional players and casual players seem a lot smaller than that one of a professional player and casual player. And that's what I think is really important about VR arcades. It takes you much less time to teach a player how to play a game that is simple, made from the ground up simple. Of course, there will be complicated games that we want to create as well, but more for the hardcore gamer. And then for the casual gamer, you can use these experiences to have them really get immersed and quickly get into that game.
Yeah, and then just a quick point, it gets people to move, exercise. It's completely different from regular gaming. And what we love to do is find ways to get people to move as much as possible throughout the space. With Prison Break, you have the blocks coming over. You have a destination to go hit your own block or go to the tiles or save your friend or whatever. And I think I haven't broken this down, but I feel like all the games that make you move without you even realizing it, even Melee Haido, the PvP game, I was moving a lot. I was sweating afterwards, but it didn't feel like work or exercise. That is so much fun and it is so unique to VR. And I think people will see it in a very positive light because then it becomes exercise, it becomes a fitness, it becomes a healthy exercise activity.
It's the same as the DDR revolution. Everybody loved DDR, and you're not really dancing. You're just pressing buttons with your feet, if you think about it. So, but you are exercising.
Yeah. So nausea. Nausea is one of the #1 problems that VR can face, or a VR experience can face. I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think gameplay mechanic for the developers causes nausea, and how do you prevent it through gameplay mechanic?
So honestly, yesterday I probably would have given a much more black and white answer of, oh, if you get super nauseous, get over it. Honestly, I mean, really, like because there are people who, no matter what you do, you can add a vignette, you can reduce how bright it is, or you can teleport, whatever. You're gonna have to have some kind of movement and stuff. But then I got sick for the first time playing a game yesterday in probably close to a year. I never get motion sickness, ever, and I got it, and I was like, okay, that's frustrating. And that actually was kind of eye-opening. And so we did actually, when we made our game, go out of our way to try and fight that. Like, we had 4 locomotion options at one point, which increased the amount of time it took to make our game probably 3-fold, but and I'm glad we did it and we got the experience there. I don't know if I would actually recommend that moving forward. I think what people should be doing is choosing kind of what Jonathan was saying earlier with game content as well. Who's my audience going to be? Because there are games like maybe Arizona Sunshine where you can just, okay, we'll add a movement system on top of teleporting or whatever, and it makes sense. But I think as games become more sophisticated, you're just going to have to probably start learning to realize, like, what is the market for people who can handle this and who cannot handle this. And I think games are going to have to be designed around that. And I think room skill games, frankly, are going to be the future. I don't think this will even be a problem within a few years, just because I don't think that small-scale VR will last for forever. That's just a personal opinion. I have nothing to base that on. But yeah, I don't know. I think paying attention to what people say and keeping that in mind from the very beginning of, this is the scope of my game and this is the locomotion scope of my game. I think you just need to think about it early on.
What's one mechanic that you've used in the game before in an experiment and it has caused nausea, and then you've kind of fixed that?
Sure. I mean, speed by itself, and then acceleration. I mean, Evan knows a bit more about that.
Locomotion sickness is usually caused just from uncoupling movement when you're moving not moving in real life and moving in the game. That's most common cause of motion sickness. So when people want to add movement, the most common is teleporting. When you go instantly, you don't feel motion sickness. But for people who want artificial locomotion, coupling it with some kind of physical movement, some people do arm swinger, where you like swing your arms to move. Other ways, a popular one is onward. A popular shooter is when you move in the direction your controller is facing, so that it's not coupled to your face, so you feel like you more have control of the movement. It causes less motion sickness. But it does really depend on the person playing, because everything there is a margin of that affects certain types of people.
So for us, we are just trying to not to make the games that you are moving.
Right.
So that's it.
Have you guys looked into a research or found a cause or something that does cause nausea that you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, as you just mentioned, the while you are moving in VR and in reality you are not moving, then that causes nausea for sure. So yeah, teleporting is definitely better, but I think that's So we just try to not do it.
Okay.
I would say the same thing. You really owe it to yourself. If you're going to make a VR game, you owe it to yourself to think about, do you really need to move incrementally? Where I need to move right over there, and it's just outside my boundary, so I'm going to either have to slide over there, or I'm going to have to teleport over there. For Quiver, we decided not to have a locomotion system that would never work for any incremental movement type, where you can't So you teleport across a huge distance, and then that's your little area for now. And so you get your room scale area, and then nobody really asks for sliding locomotion or anything like that. It also really depends on your audience. Are you targeting VR arcades? Then you even more so should be looking, let's not try to move at all. Your space is going to be this. If you're going after hardcore gamers who want a competitive first-person shooter feeling to it, then you may need to look at sliding locomotion, and you're probably not going to want to enter the arcade market anyway. That's not like those types of experiences. I don't know how much they overlap, because what you absolutely don't want to have happen is people's first-time VR experience be one that makes them sick. That's not acceptable. That is the worst thing you can do for somebody, because they might not come back to VR, and that should be a crime, because it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing experience that turning someone away because of a bad mechanic that you could have fixed is not acceptable at this point.
Yeah.
We know too much now to give in to the people who want a traditional video game experience where they're moving along, sliding on the ground, and to jeopardize someone else's experience for that, to appease what is comfortable for someone else. They can deal with teleportation. That's not. It's not fair to make someone sick. If you're gonna have to decide, you really have to decide. You should be erring on the side of caution and not making people sick.
So I have 3 examples from what we've learned in the past. So my definition, I'm not a psychologist or anything, so this is just based on experience and opinion, but I think what I've observed causes nausea is when you make the player move in a way that they don't expect to move. So race car games have been difficult for me because I drive a car, but when it doesn't feel like I'm actually driving my car and I'm moving in a certain way that I don't expect to, that causes nausea. Like if I'm sliding too fast, and also fast emotion graphics, flying past you if you're in a car, or if the car doesn't jut or give you the haptic feedback that you expect, because we know what driving a car feels like, and you know what all the acceleration, deceleration, how the push you get against your body, and if you don't feel those, I get nauseous very easily. So another example is. When we first did Jurassic Island, we were struggling with the fact of, we have this giant island, dinosaur island, for you to explore, but you only have a 20 by 20 foot space. How do we make you cover more land? And one of the experiments that we did was allowing you to have like super speed. So 1 step equals 4 steps, and that was bad. And because when I walk, I know exactly how much the world around me is supposed to move by. If I'm 4x speed now in the game, then that's not what I expect to happen, and people get nauseous. And another thing is a floor for me. So when I don't have a floor to stand on, my legs get shaky and I fall. And that makes me nauseous because I know what real life is supposed to be like. I know how to stand, and I know I stand on a floor. And when you take my floor away, I don't know what to do. And there's also kind of an inherent danger if developers are not cautious with nausea and these types of things, because there is a risk of medical conditions that you can trigger in the brain that can be irreversible, even with therapy. And you want to be very careful in your game design. Stay away from nausea. Stay away from tricking or messing with the person's brain into ways that they don't. I know how to walk. I know. I have legs. I know how to use my hands. I have a head. My head's up here. And when you bend reality too much, it's possible that, or interaction or too much, it's possible that it could be very risky, a dangerous area.
VR is a new experience in a lot of ways. One of the ways that it was new experience for me was I used to give controllers to my parents and have them play FPSs with me, and they would tell me all the time, I can't play this, I'm getting nauseous, on a 2D screen. So I was like, it's ridiculous, how can you get nauseous? What is it? And then I had VR, and I had one time with my first experience with nausea. And it's exactly what Jeremy says. It's the expectation versus what's actually happening. So I believe right now, as VR is starting, definitely we need to be extremely cautious. That's why younger audiences, younger kids, they experience nausea much less because they don't have as much experience in their life with gravity, with all these things that we take for granted. That's why younger kids, they don't have expectations yet. We haven't said those, and when they're older, all these different games, they don't have problem with nausea. That's the same with us. We experience those things. We hadn't put these preconceived notions, and that is what causes for me nausea and all these things. So personally, what I believe is when we start VR arcades, it's definitely going to be very nauseous if we're not careful, if we don't do these things. Little by little, hopefully, we can take more risks as players become more expectant of what is happening, and more expectant. And my number one thing with nausea in games, if you're gonna make a player move, you cannot make them move without some sort of point of reference. It happens a lot of times when I'm in a game where I have no point of reference and apparently I'm moving and it feels weird, it feels nauseous. So have real world reasons why you are moving, why you're doing. Like for example, there was a game that I just played on the Spire with some Spires. It was an FPS, it was lots of fun. I wanted to try it because they decided we're not going to make you move, we're not going to use teleportation, but we want it to be fast-paced. How are we going to do it? We're going to make you shoot kind of to a thing and do this, which will lasso. That whole fact of grabbing and doing this already gives your mind an expectation of I'm grabbing and I'm pulling towards there. That already gives you much less nausea than having to actually move the player. Same deal with if you move a player like in a car, in a platform or something, if you don't expect that platform to move, you are going to get nauseous. So I believe setting the players in an environment where it isn't, where you give the players reason to believe that you will be moving, and then slowly accelerate, then that'll be okay, and that might still be okay. That's another thing, acceleration. Acceleration is key. You can't do instantaneous movement because instantaneous movement is not physically, that doesn't happen in real life. Real life, you start slow and you start going faster and ramp up. Having that movement, having all those things in place, hopefully gives an expectation of the player to understand this is what is going to happen, and once it happens, their brain and their bodies are in coordinates. There's a lot of things you can do to fool the brain, which is great in VR. There's a lot of things you can do to make the person immersed. It's just that fact of actually making the expectations match up with the physics and what they're feeling.
And a secondary point about actually dealing with VR sickness, I find that I'm actually very fortunate that I suffer from VR sickness really easily because it helps me design games if I get sick. If I don't get sick, I'm generally pretty comfortable that people won't get sick on this type of experience. If you are a developer of content and you do not get VR sick, you don't get sick with artificial movement, and you play test on someone and see that they say that they did get sick, do not dismiss that. Make sure that they're your next play tester when you go and fix it, because you should go and fix it, or at least handle it in some way, and then bring it back and say, do you still get sick in this experience? Don't take advantage of people who do get motion sickness, because you really want to make sure that you handle all the possibilities.
As a case study to that of the expectations about things like this, I played a game where movement was you moved sideways whenever you did this. That is very sickening to me personally. But I played the exact same game with a controller where I pressed sideways and I would move sideways. No motion sickness. But this one, because I don't expect this means this. So that's another thing, depending on the controls of the things, if you're expecting all this. It's all about, for me personally, expectation and how you feed back to the player that expectation.
Yeah. So we want to open up for audience Q&A now. Yeah.
Sure. So there seems to be two different tacks with the motion sickness. One is to try to mitigate it as much as possible when we're designing to avoid it, and the other is to roll with it and let the people that can handle it use that. I think the problem with trying to make it accessible to everyone is that you do limit a lot of the game styles and motion styles you could use, and you're cutting off a lot of things you can feel with, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you have a very particular idea in mind, if you need to be moving fast, then you just need to know that your market is much more limited, and you need to plan accordingly. And you want to warn people, say, look, this is not a beginner experience, and you shouldn't be putting your grandmother in this. the first time until she has her VR legs. And
What's in the crime to
if
make
you
the-
don't- Exactly, and they never develop, then she just never goes into that experience. I don't think that we should be limiting our creativity, but you should at least sit down and spend an hour or so thinking, okay, how can I mitigate it as much as possible within the scope of the game? I wouldn't advocate not making games because of a feature that makes some people uncomfortable. But at the same time, you should at least always be thinking about it.
Different for arcades, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, arcades exactly are very
My
different.
analogy to that is I open a restaurant and all my food is going to be spicy food. You're limiting your market. Not everybody likes spicy foods.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean that you should stop making spicy foods. Maybe it just means that you should do.
Non-spicy options.
You have no spicy options. That's pretty much what you do.
In your experience, do people get over it at what time? Do you get acclimated to it? Working up?
Me personally, since I get affected by the sickness, I find that it depends heavily on the individual experience. There are some things where I got sick initially. Hover Junkers is one of those games where I never really got over starting the ship up, and I never felt comfortable. But things like climbing, the arm swinger locomotion, I had a little bit of trouble at first, and dropping down was originally an issue, and then later on I was fine. And I think it's going to differ between individuals, and it's going to differ between experiences and exactly what type of locomotion, because while I may suffer from acceleration sickness more than someone suffers from rotational sickness, I think that there are so many specific things that can all add up to nausea that it's going to be really experience dependent.
And if I may, you mentioned medical conditions that could be triggered. I'm not familiar with, you're talking about permanent medical conditions.
Well, I mean, these are just things that I've read online on the internet, but vertigo is one example of something I've read. Yeah. So just we're aware of it, we're cognizant of it, and we want to design to be far away from that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, even if they're not forever lasting, I've had plenty of times where 2 hours later I still feel uncomfortable from a PSVR experience, which doesn't have where the positional tracking or something isn't quite right, and I play it for 30 minutes, and because I really like the game, but then when I take it off, it's I really shouldn't have done that. Now I'm going to feel bad for a number of hours, and that I think is still something that should really be considered, because having someone have a bad experience multiple hours after they're done with it is not something that you want to tell your friends about.
Then again, people drink a lot and have hangovers, so who knows?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that really quick. I mean, in terms of mental health, whatever stuff, I get panic attacks, and I've had VR offset panic attacks for sure. So that is, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily.
Panic attacks?
Sorry. That's the wrong word. Trigger them. Yeah, it's I've had them onset is what I meant to say, not offset. So that I think would at least just speak to that of, I don't know how you plan for that ever. I mean, it's the same as before every video game they have, if you have epilepsy, please don't play this. I don't think you can really plan for that, but I guess that would be at least my 2 cents on just whatever that you're reading about would probably include that. I don't know.
I think there was a gentleman here.
So I've gone to a couple of different VR arcades in Asia, and I've played a couple of games, and it seems to be wherever there is any kind of motion, but my hands are moving and my head's kind of moving, I don't get as sick. I get very motion sick that I can't ride the train from San Francisco to LA without wanting to. I can't ride a passenger if someone else is driving. But when
You'd make a great beta tester.
I don't want to be your beta.
Because too late to have your name.
Do you guys have any data or any information about early tests? I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have any motion games but when I play Drive Club, I want to kill myself. Tomorrow, I still so. Yeah.
I know that I've seen data, people give data all the time about how their game's locomotion is perfect and never causes nausea, and then you see 100 comments under that saying, this is BS, I felt awful after playing it. I think it's so user dependent because like I was mentioning before, I think that there are very particular mechanics that some people get really sick from, and then even a majority might not get sick from. But you need to because I have some of the same experiences where if I'm I love arm swing or locomotion, and that's my preference because when I'm swinging my arms, I don't get motion sickness in that very particular type of case. But I know lots of people who do, and I think that's a very it's just how our brains are wired, and they're all going to be different. And I don't think that anybody has a full set of data on all the different types of locomotion systems, and with enough people to really say anything of value at this point. And I may be wrong. I don't know if some arcade has been taking data all day, every day, all the time. But so far, I've never seen anything close to what I would be considering. Where I would say, okay, let me make a game based on this information.
At the end of the day, we need to move slowly. We can't just start creating these massive moving. You never saw movies. We started movies with a walking horse. We started the train that just went straight at the camera, and people in theaters were like, oh my God, and jumped out of the way. We can't just jump into those. We need to get people acclimated to this thing. And an important thing to say as content creators, especially in these starting times in the infancy, is that we as techies, as people who love tech, we are willing to forgive and to try it 3 or 4 times. That's not true in the consumer version. If a consumer gets sick their first time, their willingness to try it again is not going to be as strong. They will think VR is not worth it. I'm never trying it again. And that is why we here at the conference, and that's why we make these sort of open auditoriums so that we can all succeed, because it is a very thing that if one arcade starts making things really motion sick, very bad for everyone, that word of mouth spreads, and then other people say, oh, a VR arcade even has nothing to do with that other arcade. They'll be like, oh, I hear VR arcades causes motion sickness, man. We shouldn't go do that. We need to try to work together to make it so that we all succeed together.
Gentleman in the black shirt, and then gray.
Yeah, so coming from an arcade's perspective, we don't really want to limit what we have in our arcade. We really like both Quiver and the Velos, and we have, I don't think we've ever had an issue of getting motion sickness in Quiver, but we have with the Velos, and we've noticed that it's mainly really just anything with continuous motion has the possibility of making somebody motion sick. And so we feel, along the lines of what he just said, it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that people don't get motion sickness while they're in our arcade, just so, because we want them coming back, obviously. But we do want people having the opportunity to play the Velos. So we're working with Springboard.
We just made a filter.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get in, it gives you the option for motion sickness or non-motion sickness, and so that they can just filter up the game for them. And so,
I mean,
but there is an option that we have inside the Springboard interface where people can turn off any games that have the possibility of making motion sick.
And I think that's quite a reasonable thing to do, because if someone wants to play a horror game and the only option is one that has artificial locomotion, then absolutely don't say, no, you're not allowed to play that. But here's the risk, and we'd like you to know that up front so that when if you do get motion sickness, it's not, oh, VR sucks. It's, okay, maybe I should step back and try one of the games that doesn't have the possibility of doing that first.
It's all about expectations and the sale.
Yeah.
I think,
We'll do the gentleman in gray then in the front. Yeah.
Do you have any knowledge of whether traditional remedies are effective? You know, eating ginger, avoiding greasy foods, that kind of thing. Does that apply to VR?
Thought about it.
I have seen even the demo outside, blowing air on someone's face is I think has been, I've seen articles at least, I don't know if studies is the right word, but I've seen articles about it, and firsthand experience at least seems to corroborate that idea that things like having air rush against you will trick your brain a bit more into believing that you could be moving right now, so it's not as likely to say, okay, something's wrong, we got to throw up. Whether or not the more home remedy type solutions are effective. I don't know. I don't know if that's been tested. I think it's worthwhile to test. It doesn't seem like it has a very high cost to test something like that.
So I recommend that emotion medication
Does help. So the easiest one is actual ginger, right? You get ginger stats, but with actual ginger. I recommend that you try that to do your own science because you're infected.
Does anybody know the most motion sick game so I can try that? Just get back some motion sick myself over a weekend and just drink ginger.
Yeah, one of the
I volunteer.
a roller coaster, what's the Spider-Man?
Edge of Nowhere.
Edge of Nowhere? Okay, write down these down.
That goes sideways, forward, up and down.
Excellent.
So
Someone should make
that.
should test that.
There's a difference between the sensation coming in, pressure on your skin, wind, and then also your eyes. So if your visual system and your ears are telling you two different stories, that's where the thing kicks in. And your visual system, your vestibular system notices side-to-side movement. It's like there's the ring that goes that way, the ring that goes forward, and the ring that goes up. So diagonal jumping puzzles, not only are you not feeling left to right, you're not feeling forward, and then because you're jumping, you're not feeling up or down. So it's pretty much your TV, there's those.
Okay. So we're going to take one more question, the gentleman up front, and then we'll be.
Two things. One, I agree with him on not limiting. I think the motion sickness is a key point, but I also think that's the wow factor. So any games that you have played that you did get that, you think about those. That enters your brain. When you go to a theme park, Disneyland, Magic Mountain, any of those, if you get motion sickness, you're not going to go on that roller coaster. You're going to go to other games. So as long as people are aware of it in the arcade situation where this may cause a little bit of motion sickness, they're warned on it and they can move away from that. But I think that's part of the big wow factor, number one. Number two, on the games with people that are not familiar with them, like you guys grew up with play sticks in your hands. I grew up with a ping pong table, whatever. But the tutorials, the short tutorials really help people. And it takes the labor out of it, because it's labor intensive to have one person teaching this one, teaching that one, teaching. So short tutorials at the beginning of games, it may be a little more expensive to produce, but just a brief tutorial may help people overcome that and shorten that gap, less labor.
Even the term is for that I use conveyance to convey the rules of the game during the game.
Right.
So that way you don't feel like you're learning first how to play the game and then how I'm playing. You make the learning experience part of the game. And that's something in VR that you can do much easier, because I tell you punch that block, you'll know, or if you see a block that is cracked, then we've had players that just see a cracked block and they just walk over and punch it because we're conveying the message of this looks like something I could punch.
Yep. And I think that also goes back to intuitive controls, because for something like Quiver, I could say you need to use the trigger to grab an arrow off the quiver on your back and then move it to the position on the bow and do that. Instead, every time I say there's a quiver on your back that has arrows, go grab one. And everybody goes and does that with the trigger of the button. And if it's intuitive, then you don't need to explain a lot of things. And making sure that you can explain things in that short a sentence so that then a little message could come on screen that says, quiver on your back, grab an arrow. Instead of trying to have a 7-step instruction manual for such a simple action is really helpful.
Yeah. And coming to the first thing you talked about, the whole motion, roller coasters and everything, usually people that go get motion sick on a roller coaster and go again are people that had good experiences first with the roller coasters. People that have their first experience on a roller coaster is motion sickness, is a bad experience, they're much less likely to get another roller coaster. But if my first roller coaster was fun, and then my second one had motion sickness, then I have that, okay, it doesn't always happen. I still can have fun in this roller coaster. So it is very important to try out, especially for new players, something that is fun, that works straight up, so that they're in their mentality they have VR is fun. And then whenever you go to another game, the thought doesn't become VR is nauseous, the thought becomes this VR game makes me nauseous, or I get nauseous because of this VR game. It sets the title to the game, not to the medium.
Right.
So it is very important to at least that first experience to be a good experience to merge them into it. But after that first good experience, I totally agree. You can take a little bit more risks with players, and if you get motion sick of that game, then just don't play that game.
So I want to wrap up the panel, but does anybody on the panel have any questions for the audience or for each of the panelists in terms of learnings? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is the end of the VR Studios panels. Thank you. Yeah. Please, round of applause for the panelists. Thank you. Cool. So I just want to make a quick announcement. We have sent out a survey over email, and well, I think we also have some paper copies at the registration table. We would really appreciate it if you guys could all fill out that survey. We are committed to designing the conference around your business needs, and the survey will allow us to make the next conference even better. And the people who do fill out the survey, you all might could get a $50 discount on your 2018 pass, early bird attendee or exhibitor pass. So we'd really, really appreciate your feedback. Definitely very important to us. And after this panel, we have a couple meetings. Now, they're going to be a lot more close-knit. It's not going to be like, people up here and the audience out there. It's more going to be like we have our VR Arcades meeting and also a Tips for VR Studios meeting. It'll just be some chairs up here on the table, and we'll be kind of discussing through like meeting agendas. But you're free to come and sit in the front row and join or join us up here if you're part of the category. But I guess I'll kind of take this as a kind of a final, we do have a raffle happening after the meetings are done, before the end of the exhibition. So do come back for that final raffle. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to the panelists.
Do you literally want us to fill it out right now?
Oh, no, you don't have to fill it out right now.
I was
Yeah.
like,